Hey guys, how's it going? As promised, I am going to disassemble this Dwyer BBN-L for Kyle over at Red Wolf EDC because it has a little bit of lock rock, I'll call it. Don't know if you can hear that, but you can see the lock bar moves because it got a little unsprung, is what I believe happened. So let's just pull it apart. We'll do a little bit of cleaning of it as well, and we'll bring the lock back some, and hopefully fix that problem. And we'll see. Hopefully this goes quickly and smoothly. I have not done a disassembly video here in the new studio setup, I don't believe. Now this pivot, you do need have two tools usually, but I kind of broke it free already, so hopefully I can just do it. When I put it back together, I have another Torx here that I can use to back it up and whatnot. So yeah, I can already tell this is kind of messy. There's a lot of gunk in here. Yeah. Little gunky. So that doesn't help the action either. But we will take care of that at the same time as the spring. Try to get this kind of cleaned off a little bit here. Get the blade out of here without cutting myself, because that would suck. Because this thing is really sharp also, so you do need to be careful with that. And what you could do also is put some like blue painter's tape on a knife blade before you start to work on it like this. Not a bad idea, especially if maybe you're not comfortable or something like that, perhaps. Could be a good idea as well. And I'll get some alcohol I have here on the side too. I'm just kind of getting the big gunk off first, and then I will get a clean paper towel and wipe all this stuff down with some alcohol before I put it together. So those of you that have not seen any of my other disassembly videos, I have several that I've done. I'll put a link to my disassembly playlist down below in case you're interested in that sort of thing. Yeah, they're not really sophisticated. I mean, some can be, depending on the bearings and whatnot. So some of them can be a pain in the butt to deal with. Just depends on how they are constructed. So let me get some alcohol here on a Q-tip. Trying not to make too big of a mess here on the table, but definitely there is gunk in here in the threads. So we want to get all that stuff out for sure, right? Because, yep, it's a little, like I said, it's gunky in there. Get a clean paper towel. And get some alcohol on that. And yeah, so not too hard to take these apart. You just got to kind of get yourself a tray like I have here that kind of lines everything out in little tray and little pockets so that you can kind of try to stay organized with it, is a good tip and idea. Get some gunk out of the pivot races there. A little more alcohol on this guy. So yeah, if you just take your time and get a tray or whatever, then it's really not a big deal to take them apart and clean them and maintain them and whatnot. It's not for everybody. I mean, if you're not comfortable with it, then by all means don't do it. There's some guys that, they buy a knife and they have to take it all apart the day they get it and stuff. I don't do that. I don't take mine apart generally. Okay? I just don't see the need, nor do I have the desire. On things like this, where Kyle specifically asked me if I would mind helping him out with that, because he wasn't sure why it was acting the way it was with that lock rock, and he specifically asked, then sure. And on a couple of mine, I took them apart just because they did need some cleaning and some stuff on some of my other disassemblies. And at one point in my channel, I kind of thought, well, that's a good idea. Other people are taking them apart and doing this stuff and all that, and it's just not my thing, really. I could take it or leave it. Sometimes it's a little frustrating and trying to get them back together sometimes. It can be, depending. So, not really what I do on a normal basis, if you will. But this is an interesting pivot, actually, the design, by having such a big threaded area. Normally it's a little tiny. It's more like the screws. Not quite the screw size, but it's not usually like this big. But it works. Okay, let's wipe off the washers too, just to make sure they are clean before we put it together. And I got to bend that spring back a little bit first, and then we should be good to go. And normally, if you get something brand new that has this kind of a problem, then send it back to the maker. But if it's gone through 3 or 4 people already, then you can just kind of bend it in the direction that it needs to be. Doesn't need to be a lot. It's going to spring back. And you're just kind of trying to get it farther over than it was to begin with. Okay? So then we're going to put this back together. Like that. Going to get a little bit of lube over here that I have, and we'll kind of just off camera here, I like to kind of prime the tube, if you will, so that I know that it's time for it to come out and I'm not just sitting here waiting, right? And then we'll drop a washer on there. And I like to kind of try to spin the washer a little bit so that it can kind of distribute the lube underneath. A couple of drops on top of the washer now also. And maybe a little bit on the actual pivot itself, right? Okay, and then the blade goes on. And then I like to just move the blade a little bit again to distribute some of that lube that we put on top of the washer. Same thing here again, a little bit on this surface. And then the washer. Doesn't want to move around there. And then a little bit more lube on this one. So that we can then... Now here sometimes it's a little tricky. So sometimes what you're going to want to do is open it, because you don't want to be fighting the lock, right? And what you can do, what I do oftentimes is try to get it lined up, and then you can run it back and forth a little bit to help distribute some of that oil. And then you just have to line everything up. And we'll put some Loctite on stuff when they're all done. I like to kind of dry fit it all first. And just kind of, quote, finger tight. Just to make sure you get everything started correctly. Because you don't want to tighten something down and then have it be little misaligned and, have to force in the next screw or something like that. So you just want to take it easy, kind of back it out a little bit, get it all threaded correctly, because certainly you don't want to cross thread stuff. And then once they're all in, I'm going to snug down these ones and give it a little run. Check the centering. Check the spring. It still needs to go over a little more. So again, another reason why I didn't want to put Loctite, because it may have to come back apart to really bend that spring in more. And on this one, I'm just using my finger on the backside of the pivot to help keep it in place and not spinning around free. Set that down. Kind of try to look and see where it's at now and just kind of bend it on in. It's hard to get kind of a good grip sometimes. You're kind of like, well, where do I hold it? Where do I want to grab it from? Because you want to be sure that you're bending the spring and the lock, not this side of the frame, right? Okay, I think that moved it over pretty good that time. So hopefully that will be enough. And yeah, by doing it with the blade open is going to be easier because you're not fighting the pressure of the lock on if the blade was closed. Oops. And yes, try not to drop anything on the floor and be careful because sometimes springs go flying. Depending on what type of a knife you're taking apart, there could be some little pieces that might go for a ride across the room. And you don't want to tighten the pivot too tight or else the blade won't move. There you go. Now it is solid and doesn't move. Okay, so now we can tighten these up. I think the body ones I got pretty tight already. And then the pivot, we want to check for blade play and centering. Looks pretty well centered. Give it a little bit of a crank down. Oops. You want it tight enough to not move, but loose enough. A little bit too tight because it's not going to fly open, right? So you got to back it off a little bit. Sometimes you just got to back it off a little bit and then snug it. It's minute. It's so minute. And then you want to just check for blade play. Back and forth, up and down, and call it good. There you go. And it's a lot smoother now because it's got the gunk out of it. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's slightly, it's a little deceiving. I think it is pretty well centered. So there you go. I will loosen that pivot again and put a little bit of Loctite on it after the video just to tighten it up so that it doesn't move out because it's super, not loose, but it's not super tight. So I will put a little bit of Loctite on it so that, and then let that cure overnight and it'll be good to go. And I'm not sending these back to Kyle just yet anyway because I've got a few more of his knives to do before I send them back. So it'll be all ready for him when it is. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts. I would love to hear. Have a great day, guys, and I appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.